Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I hope that you are very well, and a special hello to the insane number of new subscribers. My reading journal video, which went up a week ago from when I'm filming this, has had a lot of views, more than I usually get, and a lot of new subscribers, way more than I usually get. And it may be small potatoes to some people, but I had a soft goal of hitting 200 subscribers by the end of the year, and we have way surpassed that. So thank you very much. Today it is possibly the biggest video of the year for any booktuber, and that is the best fiction that I read this year. I've already told you about my best non-fiction, and here is my best fiction. It's not ranked, there's not like a top 10, it's just a selection of the books that I absolutely adored this year. I am filming this before Christmas, hence the Christmas mug, but I know you'll see it after Christmas, so I didn't put a Christmas jumper on. Much needed coffee today. So, without any further ado, let's get to the books. The first one on my pile of books down here is Milo and Marcos at the End of the World by Kevin Christopher Snipes. I loved this book so much more than I was expecting, gotta be honest. I thought I would enjoy it and have a fun time and move on, but it was incredible. Just a quick note to say, obviously this is an ARC that was sent to me by the publishers. I will make a note in the description of where I got all of the books that I'm mentioning here today, but they are all genuinely my favourite books of the year. This is about two high schoolers in Florida, and they battle with their feelings for each other, their feelings about religion and faith and how that intersects with their sexuality. So if you watch my non-fiction video, that was a strong theme of one of my favourite non-fiction books that I read as well. So I really was sort of drawn to this for that reason. Milo and Marcos are slowly falling in love, but every time they do, then something kind of apocalyptic happens, and it was just so wonderful and so tender, and like the emotions of it and the feelings that it dealt with, but also the way the kind of apocalypse was tied into the story was genius, and it was funny and heartbreaking, and oh, it was so good. It was so good. I feel like this deserves to be one of the most talked about YA releases this year, and for some reason it's not, so you should read this. You should read this. You should read this. The next one is actually a series, and an unfinished series at that, in that I haven't read them all. They are all out. And that is the 6 Tudor Queens series by Alison Weir. If I just get the ones I've read so far. These are the ones I've read so far. I think they're all Anne of Cleves is upside down. These are the ones I've read so far. So this is a fiction series about the wives of Henry VIII, and Alison Weir is a historian. She has written a lot of non-fiction, as you know, because I read a lot of it and talk about a lot of it, but so far I've read Catherine of Aragon, The True Queen, Anne Boleyn, A King's Obsession, Jane Seymour, The Haunted Queen, and Anna of Claver, Queen of Secrets. And I mean, they're amazing. They're so amazing. And these are some of the longer books I read, especially like this Catherine of Aragon one. This is a chunky book. But they flew past. I'm really enjoying them. We all know I love the Tudors, especially the 6 Wives of Henry VIII. 6! And I'm just having a wonderful time reading them. It's great knowing, especially for the first 2, and to a smaller extent the third one, that it all comes from a place of research and truth and knowledge. As we progress through the wives, there is less historical evidence, less kind of things we know about them. So this one was kind of my least favourite, because it did go a little bit wild and wacky with and she like admitted this in the author's note. She was like, I know this was wild, with the kind of things that could have happened in her life. But I'm loving this series. And also a quick shout out to What's the one I'm thinking of? Elizabeth of York, which I listened to the audiobook of. Same author, listened to the audiobook of, and that was, again, incredible. So I'm loving her kind of fictional biographies, is how I would sort of call them. So yeah, highly recommend all of these. Next up is a translated fiction, and that is The Forest of Woolen Steel by Natsu Miyashita. I loved this book so much, and I don't know why I didn't realise how much I would love this book, because it's about autumn and about pianos, and those are like two of my favourite things. So I don't know why I didn't realise I would love this book, but I loved it. This has been translated from Japanese, and the main character, Tomura, he hears a piano being played, and it kind of, when he's, I think he's in sixth form, kind of that like 16, 17, 18 age, he hears a piano being played properly and well and being performed, and it's the love of his life. He hears it and he falls in love with it and decides he wants to be a piano tuner. And it follows him on his journey and the kind of lives and people that he meets. Very kind of, there's not a huge sort of plot, more kind of emotional and character growth throughout. Beautifully written and some stunning illustrations as well. I want these prints on my wall, but you can't buy them. So I've ordered a second copy, and I'm gonna carefully remove the pages that have the illustrations that I love, and I'm gonna frame them and put them up on the wall. This is the last one. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. Isn't it gorgeous? I'm obsessed. And I feel like they kind of encapsulate the writing and the emotion and just the beauty of it all. I love it so much. It's so good. So good. I've been really enjoying reading translated fiction. I haven't read much of it this year, and I'm hoping to read a lot more next year, but this is definitely up there with one of the best pieces of translated fiction I have read, if not the best. Those are all the physical books on the pile, so now we're going to talk about some of the ebooks and audiobooks that I loved this year. Okay, so first of all, I think if I had to pick a book of the year, it would be this one. And I listened to the audiobook, and it was incredible. It was one of the longest audiobooks I've ever listened to, but it was incredible. And it's Babel by R.F. Kuang. I think if you're binge watching a lot of BookTube end of the year videos, Babel is the one that's going to keep coming up. Obviously it's been a hit this year. It's been really, really popular. Loads of people have bought it, have been reading it, have been talking about it, and it deserves all the hype. It is so good. It's a kind of fantasy, historical, speculative mixture, and follows some translators in the early 19th century in a fantasy where, in a world where there's a kind of fantasy twist, a sort of almost magical realism. It's a very small fantasy element, but it impacts the whole world, and where magic exists in the space between translated words. So when you translate from one language to another, it's never a fully literal translation, you know, there's always some nuance that's lost in translation, and that nuance is where the literal magic is in this story. And so in this world, then people from other cultures who speak other languages can be very highly prized, and from a British colonial perspective, the more control you have over those people, the more power you have. And so our main character is Robin, who is from Canton, and he is taken in by an English professor and goes to learn at Babel at Oxford University to learn about translation, and it kind of unpacks all of these different things going on, and it's so good. I feel like almost the less you know beyond that, the better. I don't want to kind of ruin the plot, because I had no idea where it was going, and I loved that I had no idea where it was going. It very much two halves. The first half very kind of what I would call dark academia shenanigans. You know, going to lectures, late nights at the library, secret societies, meeting with, you know, up in the quad and doing your homework, all that sort of thing. And then the second half, we get a little bit more into global politics. And it was amazing. It was so good. It was so good. Next up is actually the very first book I read this year. So you know that it's good. Because, you know, some of these I read in like November, December. They're fresh in there. I read this on the 1st of January. And it's still one of the best books I read this year. And that is One Verse Multi by Xander Santiago. So the main character, Martin, works for the Multiverse Protection Corporation, and it's his job to close the gaps between universes. Things keep leaking through. This was the moment when I read this, I was like, this has just sealed the deal in this book for me. Just a tiny thing, but that Mandela effects, so when you believe something, when a large group of people believe something that is completely not true and has never been true, that they are due to leaks between the multiverses, because those are the things that differ. Genius. So he's trying to close the gaps between the universes, but someone is trying to open them all up and end all the universes. He has to stop them. Turns into a critique of late stage capitalism. Also, there's like loads of queer joy and romance. Tick, tick, tick. Loved it all. It's great. The next one is it's not quite a controversial one. Maybe I would just call it a controversial one. Husband Material by Alexis Hall. I love Alexis Hall's books. I love everything he writes. I think I've given 5 stars to every Alexis Hall book I've ever read. He writes great books. As well as having a romance and exploring Luke and Oliver's relationship and the progression of their relationship, then there was also very strong themes about identity, about relationship to the wider queer community, about equality and assimilation and heteronormativity. So much going on. I keep meaning to do like a full sit down discussion about this book because there is so much in there and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And I don't think I can think of any other book that I've ever read that explores those ideas so well. Also, the audiobook narration, 11 out of 10. Absolutely brilliant. And the final book on my list is The Attic Child by Lola J. I loved this book. It was obviously, that's why it's on this list. This book follows kind of 2 timelines. So the first one is a boy who was born and grew up in what is now the Congo and was taken to Britain by... There's a bit of a theme actually with Babel, taken to Britain by a white English professor to be his companion / servant person. And that parallels, that's in the early 20th century, and parallels the story of a young woman sort of 100 years later who is clearing out her parents' house and reliving the trauma of the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her stepmother. So you've got these 2 kind of storylines. In the modern day storyline, or sort of modern-ish storyline, then Laura she's kind of investigating his story and researching it, and the way their stories intersect is beautifully done, and it was just such a moving story. So many really awful things have happened to these characters, and sometimes you could see things coming and you would just be there going, no, please don't let this be true, please don't let it be true. And then it was, and it was so heartbreaking, and the way it was written was done so well. It was never kind of, I mean, I know they're fictional characters, but it never felt like it was kind of like trauma for the sake of it, you know? It was always done very, very well, got the balance just right. And made the emotional payoff at the end so much better for it. I think it goes without saying that I highly recommend that book, because I highly recommend all of these books, which is why they have made it onto my best books of the year list. And that is it. That is the best fiction that I read in 2022. Let me know what your favourite books are. Oh, I've spilled coffee. Let me know what your favourite books are of the year, and they might make their way onto my TBR for next year. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.